Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, stallions and stallionettes, to the first and hopefully not last unless we get canceled 2023 Controller and Real Game Awards. It's been a hell of a year for games, controllers, all gaming peripherals, keyboards, mice, headsets. In fact, thinking back decadently on my years as a gamer and definitely my 5 years or so on YouTube, I have yet to think of a year this solid when it comes to games. In proper GamerHeaven fashion, this is a rather lengthy video, and at risk of blowing at an ankle, feel free to jump around with the timestamps down there in the description as well as on the timeline of the video, but I know you want to fully honor the games, the controllers, and the gear of the year. Let's do this thing. Welcome aboard, Stallion or Stallionette. Over 200 gamepads tested, not letting off the throttle. Controller looking like a model. Reviews go down smooth. Pass me the bottle. I got paddles. Back to the lobby with a waddle. Gaming news, gear reviews, more controllers than you can use. A man of many faces, recording by the Smokin' Aces. I wasn't born the controller captain. It was you bucking Broncos that made it happen. Enough input delay. This video's slapping. So many awesome gamepads released in 2023, and I'm glad that we can honor these controllers in 3 different price points across all the popular platforms because, like I mentioned, it was a good year for controllers. So starting out with a dedicated controller for the console that I play the most with the exception of the Steam Deck, and that is going to be the PS5, and the winner here is going to be the HYPR Signature or a custom HYPR in the builder, but you gotta spec those HE Hall Effect thumbstick modules. It was almost the DualSense Edge, it was very close. Considering the DualSense Edge is the first-party pro controller from Sony, pretty astonishing considering the Microsoft Elite 1 dropped in 2015, but I will say Sony's late appearance to the pro controller world was a very welcome one, as they do have 3-way trigger stops, swappable thumbstick modules in case you get stick drift, and down the road that does open up the aftermarket of potential Hall Effect thumbstick modules that you can drop in. And I really like that the software is integrated with the PS5. You can pop up a little overlay to change your profiles, but HYPR is the first custom controller company to offer Hall Effect thumbstick modules in their builder and do it correctly. Since they had the nuts, the cojones to make this jump into the Hall Effect thumbstick world, they were the company that swallowed all the growing pains. The first 3 weeks, so the first dozen units they sent out or so, weren't the best, but that was shortly whipped into shape with the introduction of some recalibration boards that make their Hall Effect sticks very good, not only in the circularity test, but also incredibly responsive with no jitter or that weird sputter issue that they had at neutral. And on top of this, they also have options in their builder for increased and decreased thumbstick tension, which I think is fantastic. Keep in mind that's on the Hall Effect sticks, which are virtually stick drift proof. Now, if you're trying to penny pinch, and these are pretty large pennies because this is a flagship high-end controller, you can get the Signature, which is one of their pre-builts, which are sub $200 if you don't get the Hall Effect sticks and just the standard potentiometers. But if you don't care about a lot of cosmetic tweaks or upgrades or pimping out every part and component, just get the Signature with the Hall Effect sticks. But if you want to tweak every component and choose if you want paddles or 2 different rear button designs, add things like increased or decreased thumbstick tension, clicky triggers, then check out their builder and add the Hall Effect thumbsticks, as HYPR is sporting the PlayStation 5 controller of the year. As for Xbox, the TB Stealth Ultra just came out of the gate swinging, a late entry, but a strong entry this year. There's a lot of talk about this controller on forums, gaming journalistic platforms, news articles, YouTubers, and for a reason, this is a stellar controller. I was pretty impressed with Turtle Beach's budget wired Xbox controllers, the Reactor and Recon, which I had the pleasure of testing with an early review. Same thing with the Stealth Ultra, their first ever flagship high-end controller. I was able to test it about a week prior to public release, even got my review out 2 days early, and my golly jeepers, this has quickly become my favorite Xbox controller. Those rubber grips have somewhat of a cooling aspect because of that diamond pattern cut in, so if you get sweaty palms, this should help to mitigate that. The trigger stops, although they're not a digital mechanical mouse-like click, are pretty good on-offs, and the bumpers are mechanical and clicky, though a little bit small for my liking. And surprisingly, the feature that I enjoy the most about this controller is the one that I thought would be the most gimmicky. I've never personally enjoyed onboard screens. They're somewhat of a nuisance to navigate. This is not the case with the onboard command center, or CMD, which allows you to make a slew of tweaks to your controller on the fly, including rebinding the rear buttons, setting up response curves and dead zones for your thumbsticks, controlling all 4 of the onboard vibration motors, and even connecting to third-party applications such as Ring security systems or social media if you want to get alerted about your updates. But everything from the included carrying case to the way this controller fits in hand makes it my Xbox controller of the year. But don't start to glitch, because we're moving right on to the Switch. Now, this was kind of a bitch because it was almost the FunLab Firefly, which is my budget Switch controller of the year, as I've seen that on sale for around $40 on Amazon. And with that cool RGB faceplate, nice feeling D-pad, and overall killer ergonomics, not to mention 2 remappable rear buttons, that would get my budget Switch level entry. But as far as any Switch controller that came out this year, it has got to go to the NYXI Wizard, which is a $70, so pretty expensive for a Switch Joy-Con set, but very well worth it controller with a GameCube layout. All the buttons are mechanical, tactile, and clicky. You have 2 different thumbstick gate options, whether you want 8 distinct steps or a typical round design. And this thing really does take you back to the GameCube era, so if you swear by that face button layout for Smash Bros or Mario Kart, this is absolutely the controller for you to pick up. It also looks pretty sexy too with that yellow right analog stick, a sweet little ode or throwback to the real GameCube controller. As for the PC controller of the year, it's got to go to the SCUF Envision, despite the fact that there are some missing features such as gyro, very popular with PC controller players, and this doesn't use swappable thumbstick modules like the DualSense Edge or Hall Effect thumbstick modules, so you potentially could get stick drift at any possible moment. But why this stands as the leader of the pack in the PC department is the fact that almost all the controllers we're talking about today can be used on PC, but the Envision is built from the ground up for PC, which unfortunately means there's no converter or adapter support. It is strictly usable on Windows 10 or 11 PCs as of current, not even Mac support. That's pretty crazy. It is a one platform beast, but it is a beast on that one platform, and I've heard a lot of really happy campers that have picked this controller up. Ergonomically, it's pretty damn comfortable, despite the fact I usually don't like Xbox shaped controllers with side-by-side PlayStation symmetrical sticks. However, since this is a unique shape and shell design and the dimensions aren't identical to an Xbox controller, it doesn't really fall into that pitfall. What I really do like is going to be the G keys and the sax buttons. So you have 11 additional mappable inputs. The G keys are used for Windows functions, such as swapping between OBS scenes on your stream or muting your buddies in Discord. And those sax buttons are for kicking your opponents in the sax. Yeah, that's right. They're for gameplay. You can set them up for PC functions, but the sax buttons feel so great in gameplay. And I've got to tip my hat to Corsair, the parent company of SCUF, for releasing a PC-only controller, something that I didn't really expect to see going forward. But in admiration for the fact they dove all in with the PC platform, the SCUF Envision is my PC controller of the year. As for the innovative feature of the year, this was pretty close, and if I would have done this event last year, it by far would have gone to GoolieKit for introducing us to Hall Effect thumbstick modules again. Now, the Sega Dreamcast controller did sport a magnetic Hall Effect thumbstick module, but after that console, it was kind of abandoned, and that technology wasn't adopted until GoolieKit refreshed it with the old King Kong Diddy Kong Pro, which I've reviewed on the channel, which is still some of the best Hall Effect thumbstick modules on the market. GoolieKit was the first, and also one of the best, right up there with GameSir and HYPR doing Hall Effect correctly in 2023, because there are a lot of companies selling not only modules for you to install yourself, but also controllers being shipped that have pretty janky Hall Effect sticks and are simply a marketing gimmick to be slathered on the box saying, hey, these are anti-stick drift, which, by the way, you can still get stick drift with Hall Effect thumbstick modules. It's just far less likely because you have less points of failure, less physical components, and just the connectivity of magnets breaking, registering your thumbstick movement. Although you do still have a recentering spring, which keeps your thumbsticks under tension, spring-loaded like potentiometer thumbsticks. If that loses tension on you, you will get drift, baby. But it is far less likely than potentiometer thumbstick modules. But the innovative feature of the year is going to go to AIM for introducing their snap plates. Now, magnetized faceplates aren't necessarily new. SCUF's been doing this for quite some time, but the way AIM is integrating them is pretty damn sweet. Not only will they not assault the bank, but this allows you to change the look of your Pro controller without having to go out and buy a new $200+ one. Not only this, but AIM has been running frequent promotions where they've been throwing in a pair of snap plates for free, so you have a second look to your controller if you want to switch it up. And since Hall Effect thumbstick modules were kind of last year's thing, and this year we saw them stinking up our nostrils except for a handful of companies, my controller innovative feature of the year is going to go to AIM for their introduction of snap plates. The budget controller of the year, no surprise here, is going to be the GameSir G7 SE or Special Edition. What makes it special is the removal of rubber grips, which should have stayed, the removal of mechanical buttons, again, feature that should have stayed, but the addition of Hall Effect thumbstick modules. This is a controller that frequently sells for $40 on Amazon, and has up to a 1000 hertz polling rate within the manufacturer's software, which is pretty much unheard of. Not to mention the Hall Effect thumbsticks are some of the best on the market, definitely in the price point, and this controller fits wonderfully in hand. You just really can't get a better budget level Xbox or PC controller in 2023 than the GameSir G7 or SE if you get stick drift frequently. As for the software program of the year, it is going to go to DS4 or DualShock 4, which got support for the DualSense Edge very quickly. There was about a week's time where the only way to get DualSense Edge compatibility on PC, especially if you're trying to overclock or tighten your dead zones or tweak the RGB lighting, was to run a program called DSX, which I still have yet to do a little video on, a tutorial walkthrough if you will, but DS4 is going to get my program of the year because they have been incredibly aggressive with their patches and updates, getting support for new controllers such as the DualSense Edge. Now a runner-up for me would be Gamepad LA or Gamepad Law, as I've heard some people call it, and it's another tool to measure the input lag or delay of a controller, the refresh rate if you will. Those words are used interchangeably, and it's a great program, but I do still prefer X-Input Test as it does seem to be the most accurate, but I do also cross-check my results with Gamepad LA to make sure that everything matches up, or at least is in the same ballpark. As for the mobile controller of the year, we're looking at both snap and clip backbone style controllers as well as full-size mobile controllers that you might prop your phone up on the desk with a little kickstand or pop socket and then Bluetooth a full-size controller, which in that aspect you can just use a stock Xbox or PlayStation controller, but there are full-size mobile controllers on the market. Don't really understand why. If I'm gonna go mobile, I prefer these snap and clip backbone style controllers, and this year a humdinger released called the GameSir G8 Galileo, which is cheaper than all of its competitors and better, so that right there earns it the mobile controller of the year. But I'll quickly explain. It has magnetic Hall Effect thumbstick modules, virtually stick drift proof, has a killer set of rear buttons which feel almost like the actual G7 full-size controller, holds your phone incredibly sturdy with a swiveling USB-C port and some nice rubberized coating, looks hella sick with an SNES style design. It launched for $100 when a lot of its competitors were in the 160 plus range, and its Backbone and Razer competitors are still being sold for more expensive with less features. So mobile controller of the year, GameSir G8 Galileo. I'm not a big modded guy, not running Cronus Zens or controllers with mod chips soldered on the board, but we do want to talk about the modded controller of the year, which is the Modded Zone Custom. Very expensive. Actually, it might be the most expensive controller tested this year at $460, and a lot of that price does come from the fully loaded onboard mod chip, which allows you to do things like drop shot, sniper breath hold, and auto sprint. Things that I never recommend you take to online multiplayer or else you're a sleazewad. And me personally, I never really use them for single player games either, so I'm not a big modded controller dude, but it's a segment here and worth a mention. Now the coolest and most unique controller this year is going to be the if you fucking dare GTP01, and it is a sick gamepad if you want to use touchpad controls and gyroscope motion aiming on the consoles. Now I did test this on Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 and it worked flawlessly. There's a lot of setup involved, getting things like your sensitivity and button bindings dialed in, but once you are, it is a very unique way to play. Swiping with a laptop-like touchpad, which gives you real linear acceleration control of your swipey movements, but also gyroscope motion aiming, a pleasant treat. Not to mention this thing looks really cool and is pretty damn cheap. Coolest controller of the year? If you, GTP01. Now there were also some very disappointing gamepads this year, and I do mean a lot. The ROG Rikiri Pro, I had issues with the software and also thought the build quality was trash. It feels, looks, smells, tastes, and works like an $80 controller with a $200 price tag. Pretty unfortunate because I generally like ROG or Republic of Gamers equipment. Then we had the Nacon 5, which can't wake up the console because it uses a dongle and spends its money on components like removable weights in the palm grips that I personally wouldn't use and feel like could have been allocated to other components like the face buttons. I also had some pretty major issues on the Hall Effect thumbstick modules and a few other gripes buried in my review. Then the PB Crush, the main feature of that controller I couldn't even get working, which is a removable faceplate, which a lot of controllers sport, but this one was almost impossible to get off. Then the QRD Spark, which I think the title of that review was When Hall Effect Sticks Aren't Enough, because Hall Effect thumbstick modules are probably the saving grace of that controller, and even those weren't phenomenal. And there was just a lot of features that really didn't tickle me in the gamer nether region. But the winner in my eyes for disappointment of the year, so I guess the winner is a bad thing here, this is a not good category, is going to be that ROG Rikiri Pro from Asus, as I think it is a very poor entry into the pro controller world, and since it is their introduction controller, that's kind of going to set the tone, the precedence for future releases, and they're going to have some really stinky boots to unfill with the stinkage of the Rikiri. And the one you've all been waiting for, you probably know if you've been around the channel a while, or you probably could have guessed because it's a hell of a gamepad. My controller of the year is actually from China's #1 controller company, and it is their flagship high-end beast, the Darth Vader 3 Pro. I can't say enough good things about this controller, but I'm going to quickly summarize why this beast is controller of the year. I use this controller on all my platforms, PC and all the consoles. Yes, I have to do that with a converter or adapter, but the fact that it has multi-platform support in a $90 controller that has features that are well above its weight class, such as gyroscope motion aiming, 4 remappable rear buttons, trigger stops, swappable thumbstick caps. Granted, they pop off, but there's no other options included in the box. But the styling of this controller is so slick and sensual, and the value here, a $90 controller with mechanical mouse-like face buttons and D-pad, and all the Pro controller staples that you generally don't see until the flagship or high-end market of a lot of really expensive gamepads. And I see the Vader 3 Pro getting compared to much more expensive controllers very frequently, and well earned. The Vader 3 Pro is the controller of the year. It's an absolute beast, and I can't recommend it enough. You've heard my controller of the year, but now I want to hear yours. Down in the description of this video, as well as the community tab of the YouTube channel, there is going to be a poll with a slew, basically all the major gamepad releases of this year. I want you to select your favorite gamepad that released this year, and the controller with the most votes is going to be the GamerHeaven Community Controller of the Year. We're going to get the personal pick of a stallion of a man that needs no introduction. You probably know him from his headset and gaming peripheral reviews, controllers included.
You like gaming with a controller? I do. I actually have a weird obsession with collecting Xbox controllers.
That is right, the man, the myth, the legend, the technie.
Can I just fanboy out for a second? I mean, one of my favorite YouTubers, Kevin in GamerHeaven, did you mean for that to rhyme? Asked me to be in his controller roundup video. Heck yeah, sign me up. If I'm gonna be part of any GamerHeaven video, I gotta play the part right, you know what I mean? Stallions and stallionettes. But I know what you might be asking. Doesn't this dude mainly review keyboards and mice? That's true, but believe it or not, I use a controller just as much as keyboard and mouse, because I will not use a keyboard and mouse for a story game, and I will not use a controller for an FPS, mainly because I suck at controller for FPS. So now that I've rambled on and procrastinated about getting to the point of this video here, what is my favorite controller of 2023? Well, of course, it's the new Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra. And why that is the features and functions it's packing. Most importantly, being this screen. Myself as a tech nerd, I love innovative tech. And this screen, as gimmicky as some may think it is super awesome. Number one, I love my notifications getting sent right through here. The social notifications. My son's a type 1 diabetic, and being able to get those notifications right on my controller is awesome. But even beyond notifications is being able to customize the entire controller. You can adjust everything right on it. You don't have to use software. Simplicity is something I truly love. As great of a controller it is, and it is my controller of 2023, I feel like they missed a few steps. Number one, it's weirdly light. Something heavy doesn't make it quality. I don't know, maybe we all just been branded that way, but it's weird. Like, you can't even change out the thumbsticks here, and there's a lot of plastic on this. I mean, I can't even change out the D-pad. I also wish the Stealth Ultra would be compatible with the Stealth Pro headset, even though it's wireless, but unfortunately, it's only via 3.5. So again, as I stated, the Stealth Ultra is hands down the controller of the year, but yes, I do hope they come out with a V2 and give us some of those extra customization options. So there we go, my favorite controller of 2023, and big shout out to my favorite YouTuber of 2023 as well, Kevin in GamerHeaven. Thank you so much for having me on here.
Now, I did also reach out to VCUDA, but unfortunately, he had the wind blowing through the fro. He was spinning donuts on his ATV 4 states away. He's got his Discord in D&D, not Dungeons and Dragons, but don't disturb. And I really wanted to get his opinion in this video. Maybe next year, though. But now we gotta keep our ears to the streets with a man that probably knows as much about controllers as I. That is my friend and Discord moderator, the only moderator of the GamerHeaven community Discord other than myself, and just a buck bronco of a man. This is a fellow that knows his way around a controller, and I genuinely value his opinion as to what the best controller is that dropped this year. Take it away, Jack.
This is Jack Left Town 427. A lot of you have probably seen my comments in the Discord and on all the videos that Kevin posts. He asked me to make a real quick video of my favorite controller of 2023, and for me it is the Hex Gaming Ultra. This is my Xbox controller. I pimped it out myself with a lot of help from my wife because it was the only way I could spend $200 on this controller. My favorite feature, the rear buttons. Single finger actuation. I don't have to have all my fingers on a button, and I prefer it this way. Muscle memory is so much quicker. I just have to remember up, down for which button I need to hit. And it's the only thing I have consistently disagreed with Kevin about. But love his videos, totally led me to buying this controller. If any of you get a chance, don't forget he has a Hex Gaming code, get 5% off, and they do not charge for cosmetics. The only thing they charge you for is if you decide to get these little trigger stops right here so that you get the digital tap triggers. Everybody have a happy new year. See you next year.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your input. I greatly appreciate you partaking in the very first controller awards, and I genuinely hope to hear from both of you at next year's event. 2023 was an absolutely insane year for video games. In fact, I can't recall a year, at least since I've been doing the YouTube thing, with so many major releases, not only from AAA studios, but also some small indie bangers, such as Dave and Dredge, which interestingly enough collaborated with each other and have DLC within each other's games. But no matter what genre or category of game wets your whistle and tickles your beak, there was something to satisfy you this year. Just to start spewing titles at you: Starfield, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Diablo 4, Spider-Man 2, Street Fighter 6, Final Fantasy 16, Dead Space Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Hogwarts Legacy, Star Wars Survivor, Horizon Call of the Mountain for the VR boys, Armored Core 6, great to see that come back, Baldur's Gate 3, you're going to be winning a couple awards here tonight, Redfall, you're not winning shit, but you did exist, Starfield, so did you, honorable mention, well, not much honor behind it, but you're going to be talked about, Lies of P, Metroid Prime Remastered, Atomic Fart, the list goes on. It reaches my ankles and down to my uncut toenails. A lot of games came out this year, and we're going to honor a few of the brightest shining stars with the categories coming up right now. We're going to kick it off with a category that's very near and dear to my rear, and that is best environment. When I play video games, it's generally single-player experiences in my living room where I want to escape reality after sitting at my desk getting arthritis and carpal tunnel syndrome, editing for 8 to 16 hours a day. I like to kick up my feet and immerse myself in a wonderful, fictitious world, whether it's Hogwarts from Legacy, Unity from Starfield, just kidding, Pandora and Avatar, Hyrule, the Sky Islands, and the Upside Down world from Tears of the Kingdom. 2023 had no shortage of beautiful and very immersive environments to dive into, and the winner this year, this was a hard one, is going to be Pandora from Avatar. As not only is this graphically one of the most beautiful environments I've ever seen, but it really comes down to audio design as it's implemented from Ubisoft in a very unique way. Instead of playing a 17-minute track of ambient sounds, the same birds chirping, the same wind rustling through the same trees, looped over, you're going to find different plants and animals in every region that make different sounds, and everything around you is positional based. So think of it like Dolby Atmos surround, but automatically baked into the game. So every plant you brush across or every animal off in the distance is going to make a unique sound depending on distance, direction, and how they're feeling that day. It's pretty insane. Not to mention, if you are a fan of the James Cameron movies or any of the other Avatar media or backlore, you are going to love diving into this beautiful Pandora. And the actual gameplay, while it does get a little bit stale with that classic Ubisoft Far Cry formula, because you have the wonderful immersive world of Pandora in conjunction with some awesome parkour mechanics very similar to Mirror's Edge, running and flying your Icaron through this beautiful world is incredibly enjoyable. Winner, winner, Pandora. Next up is going to be Horror Game of the Year. I almost gave this to Alan Wake 2, considering that game did a full genre swap from action-adventure to third-person survival horror, which personally made the game far less enjoyable than the original for me, along with some other aspects mentioned during my initial review. Wasn't a huge fan of that game. I know it was nominated for a bunch of shit during the Game Awards, but we're watching the real Game Awards now. And AW2 is nipping at the heels of winning Horror Game of the Year. It's so weird to call Alan Wake a horror game, but here she is. But the winner for me is absolutely going to be the Dead Space remake, as oh my golly jeepers, the first trilogy was so near and dear to my rear on the PS3, and now that we brought that into the modern era with graphics and sound and accessibility features and the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback, fuck me sideways, it's got to go to Dead Space. Next up, for my Nintendo brethren and sisterin, we're talking Switch Game of the Year, and there is a surplus. You had Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, Dave the Diver. That was a late entry because it was so good on every other platform, it was ported over to the old Switch bitch. Detective Pikachu Returns, Fire Emblem Engage, Metroid Prime Remastered, that's a banger, Fanny Faye's Fuck Farm. For me, the Pokemon entries have been incredibly lazy, more so than usual, considering Game Freak has just been recycling, copying, and pasting the same formula for like 15 years, sprinkling an occasional remake or remaster in between the launch years. But Pokemon and Metroid is as neato Toledo as they are, had no chance of winning this category this year, as Tears of the Kingdom, in my opinion, has so much gosh darn replay value, as that world is massive. Not only do you have the main sandbox of Hyrule, but you also have the Sky Islands, which are some really cool floating pillars you can jump and build from. And then you also have the Stranger Things style upside down world, which is in pitch black and has its own mechanics and different enemies. And for me, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild have been basically Nintendo version of Elden Ring, where you have this massive open world that, instead of just being big but pretty bland, has all these awesome encounters and random events, cool things to build, awesome shrines, new things to discover. Everywhere you turn, there's something to distract you from the actual main storyline, which is simple but decent. Stop Ganon. So my favorite Switch game of the year is going to be Tears of the Kingdom, because I wept very much so playing this game. It was awesome. As for PS5 game of the year, it was difficult because a lot of stuff dropped on the PS5, as well as a bunch of PS4 Pro enhanced titles such as Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima. So if you hadn't played those on the PS4, it was the time to get it done on your PS5, because it's going to be the sickest experience yet. But I digress on that topic and move right into my favorite PS5 game of the year, which is going to be Spider-Man 2, which for me was like playing through a Hollywood blockbuster banger. From the opening sequence, we were getting thrown through buildings and stopping destruction around the city, fighting Sandman that's hundreds of feet, doing some crazy shit, and then you see, oh my god, there's actually two Spider-Mans on screen beating ass and getting cash, and I can swap between them on the fly. That's so cool. Once you beat the main story, which in my opinion was super sick, all the Venom stuff was super fun, and a lot of the loose ends from the first game were tied up, but once you beat that main story, there's still a lot of fun stuff to do around the city, collecting suits and gadgets, and a lot of the side quests were really unique, such as the one where you're playing as Haley Parker, a deaf gal, and you experience the world through her eyes and ears, so partially deaf. It was a very unique experience, and overall, I really enjoyed the game. Spider-Man 2 is my PS5 title of the year. What I mean by PS5 title is PS5 exclusive. It is only playable on that flappy bitch. As for Snooze of the Year, a game that nobody's really talking about, fizzled off as quickly as it came, this easily could have been Starfield, considering that game dropped off concurrent players quicker than... I couldn't find anything clever to say here, but Jesus, you know what I'm talking about. Get the pillow ready, because Dead Island 2, despite the fact it got decent reviews from gaming journalistic platforms, a 7 at IGN and GameSpot. PC Gamer Mag was a little more accurate with the general user experience, giving it a 55%, as nobody's really talking about Dead Island 2. It got a bunch of hype over the last 4 or 5 years. Fans of the original, awesome trailers, you know, ticking every box, but my box didn't really get ticked by it because the gameplay is almost identical to Dead Island 1, which is insane because the original came out in 2011. And if you're into beating zombie ass, there's just better experiences out there, such as Dying Light 2, any of the Resident Evil remakes, or Red Dead Redemption 1 with the zombie expansion, which is included with this year's remake, which I've been playing on Switch, by the way. But Dead Island 2 was a big snooze-a-roo. And now we get into the hardest fall of Starfield, and nobody could really break this collapse, this fall from grace, if you will. The hopes, the expectations were so high because it is from Bethesda, a major AAA studio that has released some serious bangers in the past. Also a couple of stinkers like 76, which a lot of people still play constantly. I have friends, even my girlfriend plays 76 on her Steam Deck, but Starfield, not so much anymore. Not very many people, including myself, are talking about Starfield. They're playing it, launching it. A lot of people have uninstalled it because there really isn't a whole hell of a lot to do. The space exploration takes a major backseat, and it is definitely a loading screen simulator. Everywhere you turn and every cigar you burn, there is going to be a load screen. You are still capped at 30 frames per second on console, which is just... Those weird little noises I just made were me trying to coherently comprehend how this is possible. I've watched all the interviews and the Digital Foundry videos on it. 30 frames per second on any console title on the modern gen consoles? No thank you. Have the option at least for a performance mode that may offer less fidelity in the graphics department, things like ray tracing and ambient occlusion, but get me to at least 40 FPS if not 60. That's really not asking for much. But furthermore than that, the modding community was definitely there to rescue the game, as things like menu interfaces, just the fucking core fundamentals of the game, were tidied up by the modding community. Not surprising, because that's been the cut of the jib for Bethesda games for the last 20 years or so on PC. Also on console, as there is a baked-in mod engine on the Xbox versions of Fallout 4, which is really cool. Also, that's supposed to be coming to Starfield, but it has not yet, and that's another thing I want to touch on, is the post-launch support is pretty fucking lackluster. When you look at CD Projekt Red, which we're going to talk about in an upcoming segment, actually it's the next segment, segment, Cyberpunk 2077 is like a completely different game in 2023. A very, very good game. It launched in rough condition, but the core fundamentals, the bones were good. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're talking about a different game now. Back to Starfield. Pretty much just gave up support. I mean, on paper, PR team-wise, they're saying they're still working on it, but if you look at the proof in the pudding here, we don't have much to dive our spoon into because the DLSS support update just got pushed out like 3 months after launch. And that's definitely a feature that should have been baked in, considering a lot of GPUs floating around are NVIDIA, not AMD. So I offer FSR, which is AMD's, I use the word loosely, equivalent to DLSS. It actually has gotten a lot better, but when it came out, it was not even comparable to DLSS, considering NVIDIA was ahead of the game on that and was already on like their second generation by the time AMD was releasing these upscaling technologies. Anywho diddly-oo, that's just one of my many complaints with the game, and the fact that Bethesda doesn't really seem active. I mean, again, proof in the pudding here. They're not really pushing updates very aggressively, and a lot of the lackluster experiences of playing the game, as well as just blatant problems, straight up issues, should have been massaged out prior to launch, considering the game was in development for many moons, many sols, if you will. And I am going to make a follow-up video, a part 2 review for Starfield. Considering my initial review, I was a little bit in the honeymoon phase, giving it a 7.5. That's far more than this game deserves. And the fact that this game had so much hype, so much anticipation, and also so much satisfaction at initial launch, and then just instantly over the next few weeks took a hard fall from grace. Starfield is landing in a bed of glass, not roses, with the hardest fall. As far as the biggest improvement, we've got to talk about CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077 2.0, 2.1 patch, and Phantom Liberty expansion. So you probably already know this information. I'm going to give you the full story of Cyberpunk. It launched in extremely rough condition, especially on the console side of the house, where it was virtually unplayable on the PS4 and Xbox One. Yes, the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, but definitely the base versions of those consoles, dipping into the low 20s frequently, having some major bugs and glitches, and even on the PC side of the house, there were some progress stopping or just straight up game busting glitches. Along with those issues, it definitely wasn't a good look that CD Projekt Red didn't allow reviewers to review the console copies of the game until the game was released, so they pretty much knew that it was in extremely rough condition. And you talk about mass hype and anticipation with something like Starfield, that is literally dwarfed by the hype and anticipation of Cyberpunk 2077, which had some crazy marketing campaigns over 7 years. That Night City radio show talking about what the game was going to be with Keanu Reeves. Same thing with the expansion using Idris Elba. But shortly after game's release, CDPR made this public apology, which I talked about, made a little video on it, and I thought it was actually pretty good, pretty heartfelt, and more importantly, instead of mentioning the problem that we all know, hey, our game's kind of busted, they came up with solutions, an actual roadmap, periodic timeline of what was going to be happening for the game, updates, patches, expansions, and they followed it to a T. And not only that, but also under-promised and over-delivered, which is something you rarely see from video game companies. But even 1 year after launch, the game was completely not only playable, but also incredibly enjoyable. But then you look at this year, and this year alone, everything, all the content that came out for CP77, it is a boatload. We're going to breeze right over it. It is truly crazy that this game's been out since December of 2020. It seems like just yesterday I was covering the news of its release and then playing it on stream the first couple weeks, and yeah, man, this game has really evolved. But why this game fully deserves this trophy, this award, is going to be 3 major pieces of content this year: Update 2.0, 2.1, and the Phantom Liberty expansion pack. So we're just going to start with 2.0 as it is the most substantial. It completely revamped the game. So things like the police system, which used to suck meat, police would just spawn out of nowhere. They added vehicle combat, enemy AI was boosted up, there's now netrunner changes, the way health and stamina is handled, the perk tree, crafting, basically everything.
Everything
is completely overhauled from the ground up for the better. So prior to 2.1, the game was already good. You can play it in that condition, stay away from the 2.0 if you like the way it runs, but 2.0, in my opinion, just really spices it up, puts a little paprika in your eyes. 2.1 took that even further, as now you have the in-cart city pass in your pocket, meaning you can hop your big ass on the metro, on the transit, and travel to 19 metro stations throughout Night City on 15 lines of fast travel. Fucking love that. Also, there's now a radio station Pip-Boy style while you're on foot. Love that. And there is now a love interest where you can spend a little bit of intimate time, if you know what I'm talking about. So that mechanic that's in a lot of games like Mass Effect and The Witcher, where you can romance your followers, your companions. When a male NPC and a female NPC love each other very much. Okay, we don't have to have this talk now, but you understand what's been added. The hot coffee mod from GTA San Andreas. Also new accessibility, customization for the heads-up display, new races, cinematic vistas of certain scenic spots in Night City where you can bust out binoculars, something that wasn't previously previous in the game. Then to tie everything together, they released the Phantom Liberty expansion pack, pretty much a whole new storyline, a new single player campaign, which in my opinion is stronger, more solid than the original, which sucks to say. I'm a big fan of Keanu Reeves, but I genuinely hate how Johnny Silverhand is delivered or written, the way he sounds to my ear holes. So not only does the celebrity frontman leading the campaign, Idris Elba, deliver a better performance in my personal opinion than Keanu, but also just what you're doing during the story is a little bit more captivating. You're a government secret agent infiltrating high security buildings and running espionage ops, all to uncover a bunch of corpo secrets. So Cyberpunk 2077 is absolutely going to win the award for biggest improvement. I know we spent a lot of time talking on this game, but there's a lot of content that came out this year to make this what we see today. As for the Breath of Fresh Air Award, it's going to be BG3 from Larian Studios. Despite the fact I'm not into turn-based combat, and that was the only thing I didn't like about the BG3 experience, and that's a big part of the core game, is the combat. But where your nostrils are going to get a tickle of fresh air is going to be the fact that this is based on the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop. It's executed perfectly with all of that backlore. You can be exactly who you want to be, do exactly what you want to do. If you don't want to pick a lock, you can break down the door if you got enough strength. Combat, boring as shit, puts me right to sleep because it's turn-based, but you do have a lot of options there. You have these radio wheels you can pop up, and you can choose what you want to do to your heart's content. You want to shoot an arrow at his ankle, or do you want to throw some sugarcane on his plums? The option is yours. But the option was mine to select a Breath of Fresh Air Award recipient, and it is by far going to be Baldur's Gate 3. As for the FPS of the year, the first-person shooter of the year, it's Call of Duty. Just kidding, it was the worst campaign we've ever seen. I have a video on it. Dive into exactly what's wrong with the campaign. It feels like multiplayer. It basically feels like you're playing Warzone. But we had some pretty spicy FPSs drop this year. Atomic Heart, which is kind of like BioShock, kind of like the light version, the diet, the margarine version.
You're semi-evil. You're the margarine of evil. You're the Diet Coke of evil. Just 1 calorie, not evil enough.
It's got the BioShock bones, kind of, but with a Russia rules the world twist. I couldn't give it FPS of the year because the actual, well, FPS mechanics, the shooting and the melee combat weren't really good in my personal opinion. The melee combat isn't nearly as fun and in-depth as the developer thinks it is. It's kind of just frustrating. And the shooting, you're constantly either low on ammunition or just feeling like the enemies are tanky, even on normal difficulty. Redfall, yeah, technically that's a first-person shooter as well, but it's also a hot, stinky sack of garbage. But my FPS of the year is going to be RoboCop. Pop till you drop, and the fun don't stop.
Once you pop, you can stop. Once you pop.
Because you're limited to a brisk walk, there's no advanced movements such as jetpacking, grapple hooking, wall running, phasing through walls, or warping through tuchuses. You have to really rely on your aim, and whether you're on mouse, gamepad, touchpad, or gyroscope motion aiming, or a combination of some of the shit I just mentioned, you're going to have a great time, and it is indeed my aim trainer of the year. So instead of sitting there by clicking on dots or running drills for a few hours, play some RoboCop, because it's basically like an aim trainer, but fun as shit, and there's nothing like those destructible environments and gore mechanics, shooting off testicles and watching heads pop off into a crimson rain. It is just so fun, so satisfying, and if you are a fan of the RoboCop lore, the TV show, or the movies, oh my goodness gracious, you are really going to have a good time with this game. It is my FPS of the year. As for RPG or role-playing game of the year, a simple Google search will reveal that a lot of the games that came out this year are technically RPGs. Technically, Starfield, Hogwarts Legacy, Diablo 4. In my book, all 3 of those games are technically a different category than what I just said, but hey, the grand world of the internet says those are all RPGs, but they're not my RPG of the year. Final Fantasy could have been there, but I didn't play it at all. It very well could have been Final Fantasy 16, considering that game got a 9 out of 10 from IGN, and 91% of Google users are hella stimulated by it, but I did not get a chance to play it this year. Like I mentioned, there's so many great games that came out, big AAA blockbuster bangers, as well as killer indies, and I didn't get around to this one, which is really unfortunate. This probably had a great chance to be my RPG of the year, but since I didn't get to wet my whistle on it personally, I can't really talk on it, but what I can and what I will, and what definitely falls into that RPG category for me, is going to be Baldur's Gate 3. You create a role and you play it. It is a role-playing game through and through.
Through and through.
And the reason this game wins RPG of the year for me is that I liked it so much despite the fact that I don't enjoy the combat mechanics. I'm not a turn-based guy, and it didn't matter. I still enjoy playing the game despite the fact the frequent combat doesn't really get me there. I'd rather be hacking and slashing, peeking and dipping. No, it's not like that at all, and that's totally fine. I would even prefer traditional turn-based combat like a Final Fantasy game. This is like a full-on in-depth 2 radial wheels on each bumper RPG, and because of that, it's RPG of the year, baby. And if you're a fighting game fan, you're probably not surprised that 21 fighting games launched this year, and 9 of them have been delayed. Kevin, there was really 21 fighting games that came out this year? Yes, a lot of them were smaller titles from indie studios, but we did have some big boys, including Mortal Kombat 1. I generally hate when these companies, these developers do these reboots of their franchises, and they call the new game what the original was called 10 years ago. So hey, it's Mortal Kombat original. Again, the gameplay is actually super good. Graphically, this game is insane, and the fatalities are just as bloody and satisfying as ever. King of Fighters, never really been into it, but some people are. It came out this year. God of Rock is a pretty unique musical fighting game. I say unique, not good. I don't think it landed perfectly, but I do think the concept was cool. And then Tekken 8 most likely would have been my fighting game of the year, but it didn't release. It was delayed, and it's going to be coming out January 26th of 24. But what's filling my fighting urges is going to be Street Fighter 6, as this has been the long-awaited comeback of the world's most iconic fighting game series. And it's on all the platforms: PS4, 5, PC, Xbox Series S and X. That's so weird that it's on the PS4, but not the Xbox One consoles. It's not my business. What is my business is what Capcom did with this game, which is introduce optional simplified controls and a party mode for casual fans. But if you're a long-term OG, you do have the intricate traditional setup and online modes, all put together in a very pretty package with vibrant new art style and a killer soundtrack. Fighting game of the year, get your gloves up, Street Fighter 6. And the remake slash remaster of the year, those are two completely different things. A remaster is turning that graphical knob to the right, generally bumping up resolution, maybe enhancing the visuals slightly, but the core mechanics are identical. A remake is just that. It's a reimagining of the original, so maybe even new cutscenes, new animations, new accessibility features, new gameplay mechanics, better controls that are more modernized, and there were quite a few this year. Despite the fact I spent a lot of time with the Metal Gear Solid remake, it's just a cash grab in my opinion, and it doesn't deserve to win this award. But what definitely does is going to be RE4, Resident Evil 4, as it is talked about positively by almost everyone in the gaming community, and rarely do you find a game that's just synonymously accepted by everyone as being killer. Also, Apple is using this as a gaming benchmark for their iPhone Pros, and the version of that game isn't some taper back mobile version. No, that is the actual console version. Would I play like that? No, I mean, it's on a tiny screen and you're using touch controls, but the fact it can do that is pretty cool. Remake slash remaster of the year, it's Resident Evil 4 taking a bite out of your neck. Now, this is a category that we might not get to enjoy every year, but this year, this blunder absolutely needs to be mentioned to my audience in case you hadn't already seen the bajillion videos floating around YouTube, and that is the scam of the year with The Day Before, a game that I've been covering for years because it looked so sweet from those visual trailers, those hype trailers, which showed zero actual gameplay, and if you compare what launched side by side with what was teased, it's a night and day difference. And that's not uncommon in the gaming space. In fact, Rockstar Games is probably the only developer I can think of where their gameplay trailers are almost identical to what you get in the actual finished product in the gameplay. This is on another level because the company completely closed its doors 4 days after launch, was removed forcefully from Steam, and made official tweets saying, sorry, shit happens. Not to mention they claim they spent 5 years of tireless work, but their developers really didn't do anything because over 80% of the game's assets, including the actual map, the city that you're walking around in, are pre-populated, pre-existing Unreal Engine assets that were purchased and dumped into the game. So the developers didn't do anything and spent the majority of their time with these killer fluff trailers, which made me and the majority of the gaming community very excited for it because it looked like an awesome zombie survival game, which we can always use another one of those. But what we don't need another one of is another stinky scam to drain our wallets dry. And that's exactly what this game was, but it has given us content creators a bunch of content to pump out for you. And also it's just given us a lot of laughs and an example of what a game studio should not do ever. So Day Before, scam of the year. As for soundtrack of the year, this was also a very hard category because there were some really good soundtracks this year. But my soundtrack of the year that gets me utterly pumped is going to be Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. I got the song saved in my Spotify. It's called Twisted Force by the composer of all of the tracks of the soundtrack, which is, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry, brother, Borislav Slavov. Let me try one more time. I can do better than that. Borislav Slavov. I think I nailed it the second time there. Instead of explaining to you why the soundtrack tickles me in the gamer nether regions, let me just insert a little bit for you. As for my adventure of the year, a game that you can truly embark on a quest, an adventure you can dive your time into, and also feel like you're somebody else immersing yourself into a beautiful fictitious world, it is going to go to Hogwarts Legacy for me. Reason being, there's been about 30 Harry Potter games if you include all the mobile and spin-offs, but 8 main entries not including Hogwarts Legacy, and those are all based on a single film, so you're very limited on the amount of content. If you watch the movie, you know exactly how the game's going to play out. As we're in Hogwarts Legacy, you create a character, a new student from scratch, and you're not encountering the tyrannical trio or any of the professors you know, because it takes place a century prior to the events chronicled in the Harry Potter novels. But why this game deserves to win Action Adventure of the Year, third person over the shoulder Action Adventure of the Year, if you will, we're talking about those Uncharted and Last of Us style games. This is the Harry Potter game that fans have been craving for decades, delivered on our doorstep, although in-game replayability is quite lackluster. The initial experience of beating that game and then doing the side content is very, very good, and being able to explore the castle of Hogwarts and the surrounding areas, things like the Forbidden Forest, or exploring the shops of Hogsmeade. Then you've got that iconic soundtrack, tickling piano notes in the background, and more importantly than all that, even if you don't give a damn about Harry Potter, the books, or the movies, it's just a fun action-adventure game. Technically, it's categorized as an ARPG or action role-playing game. It's an action-adventure to me. You're doing a lot of dodge rolls and quick combat, and yes, there's some RPG mechanics, but there's like RPG mechanics in pretty much every game. Escape from Tarkov, you've got RPG mechanics, but that's like a milsim shooter. You catch my driftwood here? It's an adventure game, and furthermore than that, it's the adventure of the year. You pick a house, and you feel like you're in that fucking house. Granted, there's only a slight bit of differences in dialogue and character gear, depending on the house you choose. The only thing that really hurts Hogwarts Legacy, in my opinion, is going to be in-game or replayability, because there were some core mechanics that were stripped from the game prior to launch, such as Quidditch. There's the actual field, but you can't play the game, which is crazy. And there was an official statement right after launch saying that no expansion packs, DLC, or really any post-launch support was planned, which, I mean, why the hell not? Considering the mass success of this game, I'm really shocked that Avalanche Software and Warner Bros. Games don't want to push out more content. I guess maybe they're focusing on a Hog Leg 2 or something? This cash cow deserves to be milked. Grab a pail. So my final sentiment here, even if you've never heard of the Harry Potter world, Legacy was a fun experience. I just wish there was a little bit more on the back end. As for stimulating our corneas, we're talking about graphics of the year, and this was pretty damn difficult as well, because each year we're pushing that bar for graphical fidelity with features like ray tracing. Cyberpunk got an update with RT Overdrive. Probably should have mentioned that earlier during the enhancement of the year category. But things like Spider-Man 2, where you see a window on a building hundreds of yards away, you swing up to it, and indeed there's a fully detailed interior with people walking around. Thought that was really cool. Swinging through the city looks absolutely gorgeous, even at speed, but when you stop and stare at the textures, it feels like I'm in stinky ass New York. This is badass. I love it. Avatar, depending on what you're running on, a PC or a PS5 in fidelity mode, it looks absolutely phenomenal. Hi-Fi Rush, beautiful, colorful, vibrant, poppy, contrasty. RoboCop Rogue City, also fun to watch the destroyable environments and gore mechanics take place. Final Fantasy has always been graphically appealing. We know that deserves to get mentioned. And Alan Wake 2 with a very unique visual style and, in my opinion, just some gorgeous graphics. This was extremely hard to peg, but I'm going to give it to CP77 with the RT Overdrive, considering this is used as the actual benchmark on PCs now. It used to be Crysis way back in the day, then it was Remedy Games Control, and now it is definitely Cyberpunk 2077 if you want to measure your rig to see what lighting techniques can do. Now keep in mind, you're probably not going to be playing with that RT Overdrive mode on, but as far as just running the benchmark, and yeah, you can play it with RT Overdrive mode on, but it's just your frame rate's tanked in the garbage. It looks fucking insane, and it wins my graphics of the year. I'm not a big indie guy. I generally gravitate towards those big AAA blockbuster bangers, whether it's just because the hype and marketing campaigns get me excited for it, or if it's the fact that there's more sustenance, content, and more to do in those games. There's something to be said about supporting a small studio or even an individual developer. Now, if I had hosted these awards previously, Stardew Valley would have absolutely won, or something like Among Us. But this year, hands down, it has to go to Dave. Fuck me, it is so fun. The gameplay mechanic is very simple. It's broken into two parts: you diving, collecting fish, and exploring the mysteries of the sea, and second part, you're running a restaurant, which you can customize, serve guests, cook sushi. Sure enough, the fish that you capture during the fishing mechanic is what you're serving at the restaurant. And that sounds so simple, and it is, but there's constantly new aspects, new fish, you're upgrading your harpoon, being able to dive more meters because you're getting better gear, and it just looks really visually pleasing. The soundtrack's cool, it's fun to look at, it's fun to play, and since it is an indie game, it's not very expensive. I've seen it on sale for under 20 bucks. It is absolutely my indie of the year. Another honorable mention is going to be Dredge. So if you want more in-depth fishing mechanics and also being able to drive the boat, unlike Dave, where you just dive off the back of it, off the stern, Dredge is cool because you can customize your ship, you see what's underneath the water when you're driving around, you're looking out for obstacles and hazards. But my indie game of the year, hands down, has got to be old David. As for game of the year, we are going to put this to a vote. It is going to be in a community post that is going to go live directly after the launch of this video. I'm going to have a handful of some of the dankest bangers, the dopest dope we've ever smoked from this year, and you're going to pick your favorite strain. But as for me personally picking a game of the year, it was very difficult, not because there were so many killer games this year, which was the case, but moreover, because there were some major cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement with all my favorite games of the year. Tears of the Kingdom and Starfield are locked to 30 frames per second on their respective consoles, and Starfield has bigger problems than that. Hogwarts Legacy has virtually no in-game support, as it was announced from the studio they weren't planning on doing any DLC or expansions. There were mechanics removed from the core game, and other than a couple of robe designs and different dialogue options, choosing a different house doesn't really change that much. Avatar is immersive and beautiful as the world is. The core gameplay mechanics are pretty much Far Cry with a facelift. Lies of P was a lot more linear and closed off than other Souls-likes. Dead Space was fun as hell, but once you're done, you're done. You've done it. Diablo 4 wasn't mentioned today because it has a lot of major release and long-term issues. Assassin's Creed, just like Call of Duty and Madden, comes out just about every year and suffers quality control-wise. Mirage slips on a banana peel. But I'm gonna have to give my game of the year to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom because it's the title that really brought me back to the Switch platform, a platform that I generally don't play in comparison to my PS5 and Xbox Series or PC or Steam Deck or phone or retro consoles or baked potato. Basically, the Switch just doesn't get played much in my household, but that has changed in 2023. I've been playing a shitload of Tears of the Kingdom because it is like Nintendo Elden Ring. Everywhere you look, there's some random encounter, some cool thing to see and do. Not to mention the building mechanics are phenomenal. Things like Ascend, being able to shoot yourself through a dungeon, really cool. Bunch of gameplay mechanics I've never seen. Also so unique that Nintendo tried to patent them. It didn't work, but they tried to patent the gameplay formula of Tears of the Kingdom. That's right, Nintendo tried to patent gameplay. My biggest gripe with this game, I mean, this would be such a better title in my corneas if it wasn't locked at 30 frames per second on the Switch. But that little NVIDIA Tegra X1 SoC or system on a chip in the Switch it was underpowered in 2017 when it launched. It was literally taken out of mid-range phones. And in 2023, it's incredibly, unexplainably lackluster as far as performance is concerned. Now, I have the Switch OLED, which is like the midlife refresh, and it did make some major enhancements for the Switch for sure. Like a lot of other little tweaks in there, like doubling the storage from 32 to 64 gigs, making the kickstand not a piece of shit, tweaking the speakers, although they sound virtually identical side by side. Anyway, got it off on a little Switch tangent there. Tears of the Kingdom, a basket full of tears for me. Those are happy tissues, not sad tissues by my bedside. I had a great time with this game, not only in docked, but also in handheld mode. One of the coolest things about the Switch, I can dock it or I can take it on the go. I say on the go, it's probably just playing handheld in my house somewhere. But because of the massive replayability, that in-game content, that you're really going to get your money's worth out of that game. You buy it once and you just continue to play it. Unlike Starfield, which nobody really is, because that in-game mechanic, spoiler alert coming, click off if you haven't played Starfield yet. Once you beat the game, you basically just respawn as a Starborn, or what are they called? See, I already totally forgot because it's just that forgettable and not exciting. You basically just relive your life and you get different armor sets, but there's really no reason to play it again. There really isn't. I'm going to make a future video on it because Starfield is an enigma and you can also farm it for views, which I haven't done yet. Everyone else is busting out their shovel. I would like to dig for some views as well around Starfield. Tears of the Kingdom does what Starfield can't and doesn't, which is giving you that in-game replayability where you feel like you have a vast wide world to explore. Exploration, that's the word here. You don't get it in Starfield because it's covered by load screens. Only about 100 of the 1,000 planets have things to do on them, and out of those, only about 12 of them have cities, outposts, or cool things to see. sea and you can't fly your ship into them, cracking through the crust of the planet like No Man's Sky. You're gonna go through 4 load screens to get there. Tears of the Kingdom is my game of the year. You have 3 very big sandboxes to explore. The mainland of Hyrule Kingdom, that underground Stranger Things upside down world, and then the Sky Islands, which are phenomenally fun to dive down with your paraglider. Tears of the Kingdom is my game of the year, considering it has kind of given me a new lease on playing on the Switch, or a new reason to play on my Switch. And that's to be valued. Not only was this game fun, but it made me play a platform, a console that I hardly ever do. So that's my game of the year. But what is yours? That is way more important than my little bitch-assed opinion. There is going to be a poll that goes live or public shortly after this video launches with a slew of some of the best games of the year according to the gaming community. And it's up to you stallions and stallionettes to put a little tick in the box next to the game that stimulated you the most in the gamer nether regions, and that will be the GamerHeaven Game of the Year community pick. Now, as far as gear of the year, I'm not going to be able to personally pick a favorite keyboard or mouse that I've tested this year because I simply didn't test or review enough of them. If you dig back in the archives of the channel, you notice around 2020, 21, even last year, I was reviewing a lot of keyboards and mice. However, the last year or so, it has been all about controllers on this channel, that and the gaming news. So with next year's GamerHeaven Awards, I do fully intend to have a favorite pick for keyboard and mice, but this year I just didn't dabble with them enough. However, I did get my hands on some of the biggest VR headsets of the year, and we did do several headset reviews this year. So let's talk about my picks for gear of the year. We're gonna start with VR or virtual reality because I think that really exploded in 2023, and I think that is because of the winner, which is the Quest 3. Despite the fact I absolutely hate Facebook as a whole and the metaverse and everything that they stand for and everything that they're trying to do, and Mark Zuckerberg zucking everyone dry and all that other fun stuff, I have the Quest 2 headset. I've owned it since launch, love it. Actually, I don't have the Meta Quest 2, I have the Oculus Quest 2 that has the OG logos on them. The Quest 3 this year, which makes some major improvements over its predecessor. Looks a little bit silly with those lenses on the outside, but those are much better for tracking. And those also give you those mixed reality experiences for that metaverse bullshit. But because the Quest 3 is a standalone headset, you can shop directly from the store. You don't need a computer or a console like the PSVR 2, which we'll talk on in just a second. It is a standalone, and it also does have full PC support, whether you are tethered for the lowest input lag or delay possible, or you are going wireless. I have done a tutorial previously. If you want to check that out, it is in the VR playlist. But the Quest 3 is the most versatile headset and also the most affordable, most approachable, and most common, the most popular. Now, the PSVR 2, I think, also does a lot of things really right. For example, the OLED screens on that bad boy are uncomparable to the LCDs on any of its competitors, even the Valve Index that sits right next to me. There's virtually no glare or reflection, inks are pitch black, colors are incredibly vibrant. Also, calibrating your IPD or interpupillary distance, very easy, but the headset just isn't that comfortable for me. I know it's very comfortable for a lot of people. Maybe it's the shape of my slanted, sloped forehead or what, but it's not as comfortable as the Valve Index or the Quest 2 for me. Although, full fairness, my Quest 2 does have some aftermarket comfort parts. VR of the year, Quest 3, which unfortunately I don't own one yet, but I have played with it and it's cool. But I do want to touch on the handheld of the year because I personally own a slew and play on my handhelds daily. In fact, during my Steam Deck OLED review, I did mention that if I could only choose one gaming device out of all my consoles, I do need to own a PC for editing, but block off my ability to game on that sucker. If I could only choose one gaming device as of now, it is the Steam Deck OLED. That's crazy to say because I have a PS5 and an Xbox Series and a PC. The fucking Deck OLED is going to be the winner here because Valve did the most sneaky stealth biggest upgrade midlife refresh to a console ever. Yes, I'm gonna call it a console. I know it's technically a gaming PC, but it's the most console-like handheld PC on the market. Now, some of the honorable handheld mentions this year: the PS Portal, which I personally am not a fan of. I even have a Wi-Fi 6E router and have sat literally on top of my PS5 to get the best possible performance. That's right, it's inside of me, and it still wasn't where I wanted it to be. Then you mentioned the fact that it doesn't have Bluetooth, so if you're using wireless headsets, you have to buy a specialty one, and there's no web browser, so you can't use a lot of public networks. Yeah, there was no chance of this winning handheld of the year for me. Same thing with the Legion Go. There are some major setbacks, including the biggest dead zones I've ever seen on handheld thumbsticks, and unlike the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, there is no setting where you can taper this back, and I do believe that's because it's not a software issue. Those are physical dead zones baked into those thumbstick modules. So unless Lenovo releases an aftermarket different version version of those Joy-Con-like Strike Master, that's not what they're called, it's Strike something, Strike controllers that you can snip on. The ones that are pre-installed suck because you have a different one on the right because it can be used as a dedicated mouse, but because of that one feature that not all gamers are going to use, the comfort suffers for all. That, not to mention the performance, has actually been savagely less than my ROG Ally, despite the fact it has the same Z1 Extreme processor. The Legion had no chance of winning Handheld of the Year here. The ROG Ally strongly did. In fact, it was very close to the Deck OLED, and when I'm going for AAA games that are too resource intensive for my Steam Deck, where it's going to be stuttering and sputtering, or I'm going to have to make too many graphical sacrifices, tapering back to 720p, low settings, and I'm still stuttering at less than 30 frames per second. At that point, I play on my ROG Ally, which does have the best screen because it supports VRR or variable refresh rate. So if there's little fluctuations or dips in the frame rate, I don't even notice them unless I stare at that frame rate counter, which was recently updated for more detail. And updates is really where it's at with that ROG Ally. Asus has been rolling out updates left and right, and with each patch, the performance is getting better, and also new features are getting introduced, like gyroscope motion aiming, which has been hardware installed, but hasn't really been usable software-wise without using a third-party program. Now it's baked right in. So the ROG Ally was extremely close to getting Handheld of the Year, but it is going to go to the Deck OLED because Valve was so sneaky and so casual about 38 changes or revisions over the original Steam Deck, which is already one of the best gaming devices on the market in my personal opinion. As for my headset of the year, the SteelSeries Arctis Nova Pro Wireless has replaced my Astro A50s as my daily cans for editing, gaming, everything at my PC. And while this headset technically came out in May of last year, I got my hands on it this year and I've really gotten a lot of time with it, and it just had to be my headset of the year. It's got Bluetooth, I use it on all my devices, all the consoles. It has infinite battery life considering it has a built-in charger and an extra battery, so you just hot swap them. They're freakishly comfortable, they look super sensual, not only in person but also camera presence wise, and most importantly with a headset, they sound absolutely phenomenal, both with active noise cancellation on and off. And you can customize them too with different side pieces, straps, kind of make them your own. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stuck around for the entire video. I know it was pretty long, just be a little bit careful on the drive home, watch your elbows when you're walking out of the stadium. There is a gift shop near the front if you take a left, in the form of a merch shop in case you want to pick up any mugs or fanny packs or anything cool like that. And I just want to say I'm very proud of how this event came together. This was kind of a last minute thing for me this year.
Thanks.
But next year and all concurrent years, it is going to be quite the opposite. This is going to be a bigger and bigger event, maybe eventually culminating in an actual physical event with YouTubers and streamers getting together to talk controllers and bullshit. But next year you can look forward to things like more guest appearances, bigger production value, and me still saying some sleazy stuff. So again, I wanted to extend a personal thank you to all you Stallions and Stallionettes watching for being part of the first and hopefully not last GamerHeaven Controller and Real Game Awards. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more Stallions and Stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.